When you watch a horror movie, you're watching fiction. That's obvious. What many don't know, however, is that many, if not most, horror movies are based on real paranormal activity that happened. Of course, the screenwriters of the movies they change some facts and they dramatize things to play on the emotions of the audience. But many, if not most, horror movies are based on real things that happened. And of course, in the movies, they come with their antichrist propaganda, which they promote all kinds of methods that go against Christ. Just understand the following: people out there that experience paranormal stuff, they seldom broadcast it. What you see in those movies, in those horror movies, that when someone experiences something out of the natural, that they broadcast it everywhere and people think they're crazy. In real life, it doesn't go that way. Well, sometimes it happens, but in general, when people experience something that they can't explain, according to their paradigm, they tend to avoid the place where it happened or the individual with whom it happened. They will talk about it, but often people will shut them down because they don't want to deal with it. There is this YouTube channel called Mr. Nightmare, and commoners send in their testimonies of paranormal things they encountered. Not all of them are exactly paranormal. Some are just creepy behavior online because they didn't screen those they were contacting with or they had contact with online. But in general, when you go through the videos of this Mr. Nightmare YouTube channel, you can find some decent real life paranormal stories. Now, I'm not going to discuss all of them because you can check the channel for yourself, and that channel is not the only channel that does this. There are more channels doing similar things. Just understand that paranormal activity happens every day. A lot of folks just don't notice it because they're too distracted. The reason I'm making this video is not to promote that Mr. Nightmare channel. I'm just pointing out that you have such channels out there. What I want to point out is that there is a particular pattern that hauntings often follow. Or what I mean is, there's a pattern when it comes to hauntings that many don't capture. They don't see it. And I'm here to explain that pattern. In the world, not everyone knows Christ. That means not everyone is born again, and even amongst those who are born again, not everyone is renewed in their mind. So there are quite some people walking by faith, but when you take the whole human population together, then those that are actively walking by faith are few, a tiny minority. There are more people saved than that tiny minority, but from all human beings, a tiny minority really walks by faith. So those who don't walk by faith, they rely on other things. And people that don't know Christ at all, but they are aware of the paranormal, they tend to use paranormal assistance in their daily life. Which you can't blame them because you need to have some kind of backup in your daily life. So what happens often is as follows. You have someone that's quite vulnerable. Now every human being is vulnerable. But in groups or in communities, you often have certain type of individuals who are extra vulnerable, either because they grew up in a single parent household, or one of their parents was mentally ill, or they may belong to the poor region of the community. So you have those people that are extra vulnerable. Now, people that are extra vulnerable are often selected as targets for the narcissistic rage of other people. Because worldly people in general, they can't handle frustration. They can't handle disappointment. So when their expectations are frustrated, they can't handle it, they can't take it. And some folks are so weak mentally that they act out immediately. Those are violent people. They're really cowards, and because they're cowards, they're violent. Now, no human society wants to put up with cowards, but because cowards are so many, society tolerates them targeting weaker people. Society tolerates narcissists to have victims as long as they don't go too far to embarrass the whole society. They are tolerated to victimize certain people. Now, the people that are targeted, they are in danger because they can even die if they resist. Because that's the point why they are targeted to begin with, because they don't have much options to retaliate or to stop the violence. And the society around tolerates it because society doesn't want to deal with their issues. So to use targets as a bin or a trash can for the frustrations and anger of the community, it works well. The rest is left alone and the targets are blamed or ignored. So the violence continues. So what often happens is that amongst the targets, some of them will find out about the paranormal or they know about paranormal, they begin to seek paranormal assistance. So they begin to pray onto Catholic saints or they begin to pray onto Mayan deities or whatever. They seek paranormal assistance. And what happens? The paranormal assistance works. And when the paranormal assistance works, the violence against them backfires on the perpetrators. But here's the thing, it's paranormal, right? So the targets are now relieved from the violence against them, but they're not delivered. So what happens now? When the violence against the target backfires, everyone still is going to perceive the victim as a perpetrator. Now the victims just sought assistance against what was done against them. And the paranormal was what was available unto them. Actually, believers should be out there acting on behalf of those targeted. But a lot of believers are trapped themselves by the world. So what was left for those people is the paranormal. And desperate for help, they took paranormal assistance. But who drove them to that to that decision? Isn't it the society around them that enabled violence against them? So when the violence backfires, it's what society did onto them that comes back. But when this happens, people now suddenly begin to treat the target better. The target often sees what's going on, and target thinks, I don't want any of it. But because the society can't act out their violence anymore against the target, now the violence begins to destroy those that enable it. So you have more stabbings, you have more wife beatings, or you have more child abuse, so things escalate. And when things escalate, what do you think is going to happen? The one that sought paranormal assistance, he or she will be blamed. Even though the violence was initiated by those common people themselves, they will blame the one that actually looked for help. So what happens then is that because the people in that society don't want to face what's going on, they will develop urban legends about the victim that used paranormal assistance against them. Remember, in the paranormal there is no real deliverance. There's only relief. So the former target now is bound to keep using the paranormal to remain relieved from violence. And this individual will likely end up being successful in life afterwards due to the paranormal aid. And what will happen then? Everyone will say, you see, that individual is the cause of all our problems. Even though the reality is that the individual that used paranormal aid realized, oh, hold on a minute, the paranormal aid works, so let me use this assistance to get ahead in life. The target did not intend to bother those that used to persecute him or just wanted to move on, so they moved on. But the people, let's say the perpetrators, that includes enablers, they now have to deal with the violence that backfired. They will become professional victims and they'll keep pointing the finger at the one they targeted. And what happens then is that the target receives a lot of psychic violence. But the violence does not affect the individual directly, but the violence remains around the individual. So wherever that individual goes, there's something bad happening. If that individual purchases a house, or they rent a flat, in the house of that individual or in their residence, there's nothing bad happening, but all around them there are accidents and all of that happening. Why? Because they're under psychic violence all the time, and uh, all all those psychic bombs that come around them are bounced off by the paranormal shield that the demons keep around the individual. But the violence is not destroyed; the negative energy just drops around the individual, and that's how often a place becomes haunted. And the individual that's targeted will simply leave, and then the environment is left with the consequences of what happened. And well, then after a while, you have people that talk about such stuff, and then an Hollywood screenwriter comes by, or someone from Bollywood or Nollywood or from whatever um, movie industry come. They hear these reports, and then they use as inspiration for a movie. They will change some facts. The one that was targeted now becomes this angry witch or this fierce warlock. And then in the movie, you have two individuals who are the protagonists who have to defeat the evil warlock. That's how they do it. Now, am I defending paranormal assistance in this video? No. I'm just pointing out that a lot of folks are driven to despair, and when demons realize you're driven to despair, oh, they will make sure that their offers are available to you. Now, demons may not offer you a demonic contract because they know that will scare you off, but in a form of pagan Christianity, they will come with paranormal relief to assist you, because demons would want you to find Christ. Because once you find Christ, there's going to be a big earthquake. No, the demons want the violence to remain so they can make use of it. But this pattern of the scapegoat receiving relief, and now the scapegoat becomes a lifelong target, but the scapegoat himself or herself is not affected directly, but the environment is, this often happens. So you may have someone renting a flat somewhere, for example, in London, and everyone around that individual becomes sick, everyone around the individual becomes depressed, but that individual just going through their daily life, the rest of her daily life. Then others notice this, and others will begin to avoid that individual because they realize that everywhere that individual is, there's harm. Is it the individual himself that harms them? No, not directly, because often the individual himself or herself is not aware of what's happening. They're distracted. But that's the danger of paranormal assistance. There is no actual deliverance, only relief. And you're relieved, but around you the violence remains and the danger remains around you. So the enemy will begin to use you to spread danger around. Now, believers, when you encounter such an individual, I don't recommend you to inform them what's going on, because most likely they're not open to it. And there are folks like that when they find out what's going on, instead of turning to Christ, the real King, and receive the real spiritual assistance, they will seek relief again. So they may join churches, or some become malevolent. They'll try to transfer all that's haunted them onto someone else. Look, I told you before that not all pagans are malevolent. Nevertheless, what they're involved with is malevolent. So the demons will do good on your behalf, only to cause greater harm in the long run. So whenever there's an individual being targeted by society, whether on a small scale or a large scale, realize that sooner or later, if that individual seeks help, whether the help is supernatural, comes from the Holy Spirit, or it's paranormal, there will be a backlash on the community. And either new victims are sought by the community, or the one that received help spiritually will become an urban legend. Now, if the individual that received assistance is a believer, then for sure that individual will be targeted more. If you are a pagan and things backfired from you when people were targeting you, you will have revenge coming after you. So even pagans experience that. When you are a believer, then for sure many will come after you. Because anytime you say no to violence, you're saying no to darkness. And when you say no to darkness, you are disrupting the peace, or quote-unquote peace, of society. And worldlings can't handle that society's peace is disrupted. If you're a pagan and you have relief, you will still face revenge, but you won't notice it. When you are a believer, the revenge will be so frequent that you will face a lot of psychic attacks around you. You will face a lot of symptoms. And that's why once you are born again and you walk by faith, you have to continue walking by faith. There's no turning back once you begin to walk by faith. Because if you would stop walking by faith, which most believers don't do, once they begin walking by faith, or once you begin to walk by faith, and suddenly you stop walking by faith because you're distracted, you are at ease, all that vengeance against you will come like a flood instantly. Because remember, when you walk by faith, you destroy the violence around you. But it doesn't mean that the red is going to give up. They won't give up. So the moment they realize that you're extra vulnerable again, or they think they have a chance, they'll do it, even if it costs them. So now you know how many urban legends or many horror legends develop. So anytime you're at a place and people tell you urban legends about hauntings, pay attention. Don't just dismiss those as just legends told by youngsters around campfires. Pay attention to the urban legends, because urban legends reveal patterns. Often, when pagans want to warn you about something, they will tell you an urban legend. And you think, oh, this is just some weird story. Now, some urban legends are really just for fun. They don't really make sense at all. But most urban legends, they conceal demonic or violent patterns that people don't want to address. Well, that's it for now. Keep agreeing with Christ and be at peace.